The sound came first, a subtle crackling that no human ear could detect, but Max's head lifted from his worn cushion, nostrils flaring. Despite eyes that had long since stopped seeing and ears that registered no sound, something stirred within him, an ancient instinct that transcended his disabilities. Upstairs, 5-year-old Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the electrical wire slowly burning through its plastic casing behind her bedroom wall. The smoke detector remained silent. It would be another 3 minutes before enough smoke accumulated to trigger its alarm. Max rose unsteadily, his arthritic joints protesting. He navigated the familiar path through the living room, carefully ascending the stairs with his characteristic double tap of each paw, confirming the space before committing his weight. Rachel awoke to the gentle but insistent pressure of Max's muzzle against her arm. The old German shepherd's body was rigid, his breath coming in short bursts. Something was wrong. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. When Max turned and moved deliberately toward Lily's room, Rachel followed, just as the first wisps of smoke began seeping through the wall. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Rachel Matthews hadn't planned on adopting any animal, let alone a senior German shepherd with multiple disabilities. At 38, she already had her hands full as a single mother working 2 jobs to keep their modest home on the outskirts of Oakville, Michigan. The small town had been her refuge after a difficult divorce 3 years ago, when she'd packed up 5-year-old Lily and what remained of their life in Chicago to start fresh. Lily wasn't like other children her age. Diagnosed with mild autism at 3, she lived mostly in her own world, rarely speaking and avoiding eye contact with strangers. Rachel had tried everything, special programs, therapy, even a brief stint with medication, but Lily's progress remained frustratingly slow. The little girl who once bubbled with laughter had become increasingly withdrawn, especially since the divorce. The Barbie Keel Animal Sanctuary sat on 15 acres of donated farmland just outside town. Founded by local legend Barbara Barbie Keel, a retired veterinarian who dedicated her golden years to saving unwanted animals, the sanctuary had become Rachel's Saturday ritual with Lily. While her daughter wouldn't interact with human children at the playground, she seemed at peace among the animals, quietly observing them from a safe distance. Max hadn't always been called Max. When he arrived at the sanctuary gates one stormy April night, he had no name, no collar, and no history. Just a skeletal frame covered in matted fur, clouded eyes that stared at nothing, and a profound silence that suggested he couldn't hear the comforting words Barbie tried to offer. The veterinarian estimated him to be around 10 or 11 years old, a senior in dog years with complete loss of vision and hearing. "Some people," Barbie had explained to Rachel with barely contained anger, "they dump their old dogs when caring gets inconvenient, especially when they're special needs." For months, Max had occupied the corner kennel, largely ignored by potential adopters who preferred younger, healthier companions. His quiet dignity in the face of his disability struck Rachel deeply. She recognized something in his patient endurance. A reflection of her own daily struggles, perhaps, or a model of resilience she wished she could instill in her daughter. The night Max arrived at the sanctuary remained vivid in Barbie Keel's memory. Rain had been hammering the metal roof of the main building when her security system alerted her to movement at the gates. On the grainy monitor, she watched a pickup truck speed away, leaving behind a soaked bundle that slowly resolved itself into the shape of a dog. By the time Barbie reached him, the German shepherd was shivering uncontrollably, his matted fur plastered against an alarmingly thin frame. There was no note, no explanation, just an abandoned senior dog left to the mercy of strangers in a thunderstorm. "You poor old soul," Barbie had whispered, carefully approaching. When the dog didn't react to her voice or footsteps, she realized the extent of his disabilities. The animal didn't startle when thunder crashed overhead, and his clouded eyes stared vacantly past her as she moved into what should have been his field of vision. For the first 3 weeks, the staff veterinarian wasn't sure the dog would survive. severely malnourished and suffering from a host of medical issues, including heartworm and a skin infection, the old German shepherd barely had the strength to stand. They named him Max after Barbie's late husband, a man who had faced his own challenges with quiet dignity. Rachel and Lily had been volunteering at the sanctuary for nearly 6 months by then. Every Saturday morning they would arrive promptly at 9. Rachel would clean kennels and walk the more energetic dogs, while Lily sat quietly in the socialization room, a converted sun porch where the more gentle animals could roam freely under supervision. "Look, Lily," Rachel said one Saturday in June, pointing to the corner where Max had been placed on a thick foam bed. "That's Max. He's new here. He can't see or hear, so he might be a little scared. Just like new places can feel scary to you sometimes." Lily didn't respond verbally. She rarely did, but she watched the old dog with unusual intensity. After an hour of observation, she did something that made Rachel's heart nearly stop. She slowly walked over to Max and sat down 2 feet away from him. Rachel held her breath. Lily never approached animals on her own initiative. She usually waited for her mother to facilitate the interaction, carefully following established routines that minimized her anxiety. Max lifted his head, nostrils flaring. Though blind and deaf, his sense of smell remained acute. He sniffed the air cautiously, then slowly, with tremendous effort, rose to his feet and took 3 halting steps toward Lily. The little girl remained perfectly still as the old dog carefully sniffed her shoes, then her knees, and finally her hands, which were folded tightly in her lap. And then it happened. Lily extended one small hand and gently touched Max's head. The contact was brief, just a feather-light pat, but it was the first time Rachel had seen her daughter voluntarily touch anyone or anything in weeks. "He's sad," Lily whispered, so quietly that Rachel wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. "What did you say, sweetie?" "He's sad," Lily repeated, a bit louder this time. "Inside." The moment was interrupted by Barbie, who entered carrying a clipboard. Her expression was grave as she gestured for Rachel to step aside. "We need to talk about Max," she said quietly. "Dr. Winters did a full workup yesterday. His kidneys are failing, his arthritis is severe, and there's evidence of neurological damage beyond his sensory impairments." Rachel glanced back at Lily, who was still sitting near Max, though not touching him again. "What does that mean for him?" she asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Barbie sighed, the weight of decades of difficult decisions evident in the sound. "We've scheduled euthanasia for Monday. He's in pain, Rachel, and with his age and disabilities, adoption isn't realistic." Rachel felt an unexpected pang of grief. Does he have to be in a shelter setting? What if he had a home environment? In theory, that would be better for his final days, Barbie admitted. But it would take a special family willing to take on a hospice case, and with his size and disabilities, it's a lot to ask. That evening, as Rachel tucked Lily into bed, her daughter spoke unprompted for the second time that day, a rare occurrence. "Max," she said simply. "Yes, we saw Max today." Lily shook her head emphatically. "Max. Here." The implication was clear, even from her limited vocabulary. Rachel spent a sleepless night weighing the practical challenges against the undeniable connection she'd witnessed. By morning, her decision was made. When they arrived at the sanctuary on Sunday, breaking their Saturday, only routine, Barbie seemed to know exactly why they had come. "Are you sure?" she asked as Rachel filled out the adoption paperwork. "It might only be for a few weeks or months." Rachel watched as Lily sat beside Max's bed, humming softly to herself. Another new behavior. "We're sure," she said, signing her name with a decisive flourish. Bringing Max home proved more challenging than Rachel had anticipated. Their modest 2-bedroom house, while comfortable for a mother and daughter, had never been configured for a large dog, let alone one with special needs. The first night, Max bumped into the coffee table 3 times, knocked over a lamp, and spent hours pacing anxiously, his claws clicking on the hardwood floors until Rachel finally laid down blankets to create pathways he could feel with his paws. "He's mapping," Dr. Winters had explained when Rachel called in a panic. "Blind dogs create mental maps of their environments. Give him time and consistency. Don't rearrange your furniture." By the 3rd day, Max had settled into a tentative routine. Rachel placed baby gates at the top and bottom of the stairs and installed a fire guard around the heating vent in the living room after discovering Max's attraction to warmth. The old dog learned quickly, developing his distinctive double-tap gait, testing each surface before committing his weight, that allowed him to navigate with surprising competence. Lily observed these adaptations with silent fascination. Although she still rarely spoke, she would sit for hours watching Max learn his way around their home. Sometimes, when she thought Rachel wasn't looking, she would place small objects in Max's path, then remove them before he could stumble, as if testing his capability. It was the first sign of Lily displaying empathy that Rachel had seen in months. The phone call came exactly 1 week after they'd brought Max home. "Ms. Matthews, this is Carol Hodgkins from the Homeowners Association." The woman's voice held the precise tone of someone executing an unpleasant but necessary duty. "We've received several concerns about your new pet." Rachel gripped the phone tighter. "Max? He's been inside except for brief backyard breaks." "Yes, wow, the issue isn't noise or property damage, it's the breed. German Shepherds are on our restricted list, and given your my circumstances, a single mother with a special needs child taking on a large, potentially dangerous breed. Several neighbors have expressed safety concerns, particularly given that the animal is disabled and unpredictable." Rachel's voice sharpened. "Who exactly complained?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but the Petersons did mention seeing you struggle to control the animal yesterday." The struggle had been nothing more than Max becoming momentarily disoriented when a squirrel had darted across their path during a slow walk around the backyard. Rachel had guided him back to familiar territory with gentle touches to his side, exactly as Dr. Winters had instructed. "There's nothing in my rental agreement prohibiting pets," Rachel said firmly. "No, but the HOA bylaws clearly state." "Send me the specific bylaw. My dog isn't going anywhere." The petition appeared on her doorstep 3 days later. Concerned Citizens for Child Safety. 15 signatures, including the Petersons and, most hurtfully, Linda Granger, whose daughter attended the same special education program as Lily. Rachel's hands trembled as she read the document requesting the removal of the dangerous animal from the premises at 1542 Maple Street. The petition cited unpredictable behavior, excessive size for the property, and potential danger to neighborhood children as primary concerns. That night, after Lily was asleep, Rachel sat on the kitchen floor beside Max, who had settled into his bed in the corner. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, stroking his graying muzzle. "I can't fight the entire neighborhood." As if in response, Max lifted his head and gently placed his chin on her knee, a gesture of comfort he'd begun offering whenever her voice held traces of distress. For a dog who couldn't see or hear, his attunement to emotional states was remarkable. The following morning brought an unexpected development. Rachel was preparing Lily's breakfast when her daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, Max walking carefully beside her, his shoulder just brushing against her hip for guidance. "Max school," Lily announced. Rachel stared, trying to decipher her daughter's meaning. "You want to take Max to school?" Lily shook her head emphatically, frustration clouding her features at being misunderstood. "Max, school." She pointed to herself, then to Max. "Teach." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want to teach Max?" The smile that broke across Lily's face was answer enough. Throughout breakfast, Lily maintained physical contact with Max, a hand on his back, a gentle touch to his ear. For a child who typically avoided physical contact, Even with her mother, the change was astonishing. That afternoon, Rachel watched in amazement as Lily systematically taught Max to navigate the living room using a series of gentle taps on different parts of his body. A touch to his left shoulder meant turn left, right shoulder turn right, the middle of his back move forward, a touch under his chin, stop. By dinner time, Max was following Lily around the house with newfound confidence, responding to her tactile guidance system with remarkable precision. "Dr. Sanders needs to see this," Rachel murmured, referring to Lily's behavioral therapist, who had made little progress in 6 months of weekly sessions. The breakthrough with Lily coincided with Rachel's discovery of a small metal tag embedded deep in Max's matted fur during his first bath, a tag she had carefully cut free and cleaned. The engraving was partially worn away, but 3 letters remained visible, FEMA. A quick internet search confirmed her suspicion, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Max had been wearing some type of official identification. When she called the sanctuary to share this finding, Barbie was equally intrigued. "I've heard of dogs being trained for FEMA search and rescue operations," she said. It would explain his incredible spatial awareness despite his disabilities. These dogs are trained to work in disaster zones, earthquakes, building collapses. "But he's blind and deaf," Rachel protested. "Now, yes, but maybe not when he was working. Service dogs are sometimes retired after injuries." The possibility that Max had once been a working dog, perhaps even a hero, added another dimension to the mystery of his past. It also gave Rachel an idea about how to address the neighborhood petition. As she watched Lily and Max navigate their evening routine, the little girl now confidently guiding the old dog through the house with her system of touches, Rachel began composing a response to the concerned citizens. Perhaps Max's past could help secure his future with them. As autumn settled over Oakville, the Matthews household fell into new rhythms. Max's adaptation to the home progressed remarkably, aided by Lily's intuitive guidance system. The German Shepherd now moved through the house with growing confidence, his mental map expanding daily. Rachel installed textured floor mats in different rooms to help Max identify where he was. A rough coir mat in the kitchen, plush carpet in Lily's bedroom, ribbed rubber in the bathroom. Each distinct texture became another clue in Max's sensory navigation system. Most surprising to Rachel was how the bond between Lily and Max transformed her daughter. The child, who had once gone days without speaking, now narrated her activities to Max in her own fragmented way. "Breakfast now?" she would announce, guiding him to his food bowl each morning. "Outside time," when it was time for his brief walks in their fenced backyard. Dr. Sanders, Lily's behavioral therapist, requested permission to observe their interactions during her monthly home visit. For 45 minutes, she watched in professional silence as Lily demonstrated her communication system with Max, gently guiding him through a series of obstacles she had created from couch cushions and toy blocks. "This is remarkable progress," Dr. Sanders finally said, making notes in Lily's file. "She's displaying spontaneous communication, sustained attention, and most importantly, empathy, understanding that Max experiences the world differently and adapting to meet his needs." "Will it last?" Rachel asked, voicing her deepest fear. Lily had shown promising advances before, only to retreat back into herself when routines changed or stress increased. "I can't make promises," Dr. Sanders replied, "but this connection appears genuine. Max provides consistent, non-threatening feedback. He doesn't make the social demands that humans do, yet he responds to her efforts in ways she finds rewarding." The therapist recommended incorporating Max into Lily's formal therapy sessions, a suggestion that delighted Lily and gave Rachel renewed hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her daughter might connect not just with an old dog, but eventually with the wider world. The HOA issue remained unresolved. Rachel had drafted and redrafted her response to the petition, trying to find the right balance between assertiveness and diplomacy. The discovery of Max's possible connection to FEMA seemed important, but without confirmation, she hesitated to make claims about his past. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly through Thomas Jenkins, the elderly Vietnam veteran who lived 3 doors down. Unlike most neighbors who now avoided direct interaction with Rachel, Mr. Jenkins stopped by one crisp October afternoon as she was guiding Max through his backyard routine. "That's a working dog," he stated simply, watching Max carefully navigate the stepping stones Rachel had placed in the yard. "Military or rescue, can tell by how he carries himself, even with the disabilities." Rachel explained her discovery of the partial FEMA tag and her suspicions about Max's background. Mr. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. "My nephew works for FEMA out in California, Earthquake Response Team. Let me make a call." 2 days later, Mr. Jenkins returned with a printout. Found him in the database. His working name was Maximilian. FEMA-certified search and rescue, deployed to 3 major earthquake zones and 1 building collapse. Retired 4 years ago after suffering injuries during a rescue operation in Mexico City. The printout included a photograph of a younger, healthier Max with his handler, a man named Robert Callahan. Both were draped in American flags, receiving some kind of commendation. "What happened to his handler?" Rachel asked, studying the image of the smiling, dark-haired man with his arm draped proudly over Max's shoulders. Mr. Jenkins shook his head. "Records don't say, but if the dog ended up abandoned, it can't be good." Armed with this documentation, Rachel composed a new letter to the HOA and made copies for each household that had signed the petition. She attached Max's service record and a brief explanation of the progress Lily had made since his arrival. The final paragraph was both a plea and a gentle rebuke. Max served his country by saving human lives. Now, in his retirement and despite his disabilities, he continues to serve by helping my daughter find her voice. I hope our community can find room for a hero who asks for nothing more than a quiet place to live out his final years with dignity. The letter didn't immediately resolve the tension, but it shifted the conversation. Several neighbors withdrew their signatures from the petition. Others maintained their distance but stopped actively campaigning against Max's presence. Linda Granger even apologized, admitting she'd signed without fully understanding the situation. As Max's place in their home solidified, Rachel noticed increasing signs of his former training. Despite his blindness and deafness, he retained an alertness to his surroundings that seemed almost uncanny. He could sense when someone approached their front door before they knocked. He grew restless shortly before storms arrived. Most remarkably, he positioned himself protectively near Lily whenever she showed signs of distress. These behaviors caught the attention of Dr. Adams, the local veterinarian who had agreed to take on Max's complex care. During a routine checkup, the vet observed Max's responsive positioning as Lily became anxious about an unexpected fire engine siren outside. "His working instincts are intact," Dr. Adams noted, watching Max press gently against Lily's side until her breathing steadied. Search and rescue dogs are trained to detect subtle changes in human physiology. Elevated heart rates, changes in respiration, even variations in body chemistry when we're under stress. "But how can he know?" Rachel asked. "Without sight or hearing." "His olfactory system, his sense of smell, is likely compensating for his other sensory losses," the vet explained. "Dogs' noses are already thousands of times more sensitive than ours. When they lose other senses, the remaining ones often become enhanced. Max is literally smelling Lily's anxiety and responding with his training." This explanation made sense of many of Max's seemingly intuitive behaviors, from his ability to locate Lily in the house to his tendency to wake just before she did on mornings when she had nightmares. It wasn't mystical or supernatural, just the remarkable adaptation of a highly trained animal whose body compensated for what it had lost. Rachel's boss at the insurance agency where she worked part-time took interest in Max's story after overhearing her describe his background to a coworker. Jack Williamson was not only her employer but also owned the local newspaper. "People love stories about service animals," he said, leaning against her desk one Friday afternoon, "and kids who overcome challenges. Put 'em together and you've got something special. Would you consider letting us do a feature?" Rachel hesitated. While public awareness might help secure Max's place in the neighborhood, she was protective of Lily's privacy. "Nothing exploitative," Jack promised, reading her concerns. "Just a human interest piece about second chances." After consulting with Dr. Sanders, who thought controlled media exposure might actually benefit Lily by creating understanding in the community, Rachel agreed to a limited interview and photo session at their home. The article appeared in the Sunday edition of the Oakville Chronicle under the headline, "Hero's Twilight, Retired Rescue Dog Finds New Purpose." The photograph showed Max resting beside Lily as she read a picture book, his graying muzzle peaceful, her small hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The piece respectfully outlined Max's service record, explained his disabilities, and described the positive impact he'd had on Lily, without delving too deeply into her diagnosis. It concluded with a quote from Rachel. "Max taught my daughter that differences aren't disabilities when you find new ways to connect. They're just invitations to be creative." The article generated exactly the kind of community response Rachel had hoped for. Several local businesses offered donations. The pet store provided a year's supply of premium dog food. A carpenter volunteered to build a ramp for the back steps to ease Max's arthritic ascents. And the children's librarian invited Lily to bring Max to a special Reading to Dogs program designed for children with communication difficulties. Most surprisingly, the article caught the attention of a regional news outlet, which contacted Rachel about including Max's story in a series about working animals in retirement. The added attention brought both opportunities and complications. Lily thrived with the predictable routine they had established, but struggled with the increase in visitors and disruptions. Rachel noticed Max becoming more protective, positioning himself between Lily and strangers, a behavior that, while well-intentioned, occasionally raised concerns among those unfamiliar with their dynamics. It was during this period of adjustment that Rachel first noticed the man watching their house. Middle-aged, with a military bearing, he sat in a blue sedan across the street for hours, never approaching but clearly observing their comings and goings. After the third day, Rachel took down his license plate number and was preparing to call the police when Mr. Jenkins identified him. "That's Michael Callahan," he said, after spotting the man during his daily walk. "Robert Callahan's son. Must have seen the newspaper piece." The revelation stunned Rachel. Max's former handler's son had found them. But why was he watching from a distance rather than introducing himself? What did he want with Max after all this time? The answer came the following day when Michael Callahan finally approached as Rachel was checking the mail. He walked with a slight limp and carried a small leather case under one arm. "Ms. Matthews," his voice was deep but hesitant, "I'm sorry for observing from a distance. I needed to be sure before I introduced myself." "Sure of what?" Rachel asked, instinctively positioning herself between the stranger and her front door, where Max and Lily were inside. "That it's really him." "Max!" Michael swallowed hard. "My father's dog." Rachel invited him in but asked him to wait in the living room while she prepared Lily for the unexpected visitor. When she returned with Max walking carefully beside her, Michael Callahan's eyes filled with tears. "It is him," he whispered. "He's aged, but it's him." Max paused several feet away, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of the visitor. For several long moments the German shepherd stood perfectly still, processing the olfactory information. Then, with a small whine, the first vocalization Rachel had ever heard from him, Max moved forward until his muzzle gently touched Michael's extended hand. "He remembers," Michael said softly, kneeling to run his hands gently over the dog's head and shoulders. Dad always said Max never forgot a scent. As Lily watched cautiously from the doorway, Michael opened the leather case he'd brought, revealing photographs, documents, and a worn red collar with FEMA identification tags intact. "I thought you might want to know his full story," he said, "and I wanted to thank you. The article said he was helping your daughter. My dad would have loved that. Max was always at his best when he was needed." The regional news feature brought Max's story to an audience far beyond Oakville. From Rescue to Rescuer, A Dog's Second Chapter, aired on a Wednesday evening in late November, reaching homes across 3 counties. The 5-minute segment showed Max navigating the Matthews home with his characteristic double-tap gait, Lily demonstrating her tactile guidance system, and Rachel explaining the German Shepherd's remarkable adaptation to his disability. The reporter, clearly moved by the story, emphasized Max's transformation from an abandoned elderly dog scheduled for euthanasia to a catalyst for a child's breakthrough. By Thursday morning, Rachel's phone was ringing constantly. Local businesses offered donations and services. Strangers called the newspaper asking how they could contribute to Max's care. The elementary school principal invited Rachel to bring Max for a special assembly on disabilities and acceptance. Even Carol Hodgkins, the HOA representative who had delivered the petition, left an awkward message expressing her reconsideration of the situation in light of new information. "It's overwhelming," Rachel told Michael Callahan over coffee at the small diner near her office. Their meetings had become a regular occurrence since his dramatic appearance at their door. "Everyone wants a piece of Max now, but he gets anxious with too many visitors or changes to his routine." Michael nodded, understanding the dilemma. In the weeks since he'd found Max, he had become something of a fixture in their lives, bringing photographs and mementos of the German Shepherd's working days that helped fill in the blanks of his remarkable life. "Dad's the same way," he said, referring to Robert Callahan, Max's former handler who was still recovering in a rehabilitation facility across the state. "Routine is everything after trauma. The brain craves predictability when everything else has been upended." "How is your father?" Rachel asked. She had yet to meet the man whose life had been so intertwined with Max's, though they had spoken briefly by phone. Michael's face brightened. "Better. The doctors are impressed with his progress. He's regained enough speech to start telling his stories again, mostly about Max." He hesitated, then added, "He'd really like to see him if that would ever be possible." Rachel considered the logistics. "We'd need to figure out how to make it work for Lily. Changes to routine are difficult for her, too." She smiled slightly. "Another thing she and Max have in common." "Maybe we could bring Dad here instead once he's cleared for travel," Michael suggested. "He could stay with me. I've been fixing up the guest room." The prospect of Robert Callahan coming to Oakville added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. While Rachel wanted to facilitate a reunion between Max and his former handler, she worried about what it might mean for Lily, who had formed such a deep bond with the German Shepherd. Would seeing Max with Robert trigger her insecurities? Would it confuse Max himself, who had adapted so well to his new family? These concerns receded temporarily in the face of a more immediate crisis. The increased attention from the news feature had attracted interest from unexpected quarters. Rachel was reviewing insurance claims at her desk when Jack Williamson appeared at her cubicle, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Someone's been asking questions about Max," he said without preamble, "more specifically about ownership rights." Rachel felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "A woman called the paper this morning, claiming to be Max's owner. Said she recognized him from the feature and wants him back." "That's impossible," Rachel protested. Barbie told me he was abandoned at the sanctuary gates with no identification except that partial FEMA tag I found later. We have adoption papers." Jack nodded. "I told her as much, but she's insistent. Says she can prove it's her dog. Something about a distinctive scar on his right rear leg." Rachel's mind raced. Max did indeed have a jagged scar on his right hind leg, which Dr. Adams had attributed to an old injury, possibly from his working days. It wasn't visible in the news footage, which had focused primarily on Max's face and his navigation techniques. "What did you tell her?" "That she'd need to contact you directly or go through proper legal channels." "I refused to give her your information, but," Jack looked apologetic, "your name was in the feature. It wouldn't be hard to find you." Rachel thanked him for the warning and immediately called Michael, who promised to research the legal aspects of pet ownership and abandonment cases. Then she called Barbie, who was equally concerned. "There was no collar, no microchip when he arrived," the sanctuary owner confirmed. "We held him for the standard stray period before listing him for adoption. Everything was done by the book." "Could someone have stolen him and abandoned him?" Rachel asked, trying to make sense of the situation. "It's possible," Barbie admitted, "but after 5 months? And why come forward only after media attention?" The answer became clear when the certified letter arrived 3 days later. Elaine Mercer, claiming to be Max's rightful owner, was not seeking the return of her beloved pet, but rather equable compensation for the unauthorized use of her animal's image and story. The letter, drafted by an attorney specializing in entertainment law, demanded a percentage of any proceeds, donations, or benefits accrued through Max's story. "It's extortion," Michael said flatly when Rachel showed him the letter. They were sitting at her kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed, Max lying comfortably at their feet. "She's looking for a payout, not a pet." "But what if she really is his owner?" Rachel worried. "What if he was stolen from her?" Michael shook his head firmly. "Max was with my father for 7 years. Before that, he was trained by FEMA from puppyhood. If this woman is claiming ownership, she's lying." He touched Rachel's hand reassuringly. "But we'll fight this properly. I've already spoken with a friend who practices family law. He's willing to help pro bono." The legal questions became moot the following week when Elaine Mercer's fraudulent claims came to light. She had attempted similar schemes with other human interest stories, claiming ownership of everything from lost heirlooms to historic artifacts. The district attorney's office was already building a case against her for multiple counts of attempted fraud. While the legal threat dissipated, its emotional impact lingered. Rachel found herself watching Max more closely, as if someone might snatch him away at any moment. Lily, sensitive to changes in household tension, began having nightmares again, often climbing into Rachel's bed in the early hours of the morning. Dr. Sanders, during her monthly home visit, observed the heightened anxiety in both mother and daughter. "Children pick up on our emotional states more than we realize," she explained gently, "especially children like Lily, who are already processing the world differently." "I'm trying to shield her from the drama," Rachel said, watching through the window as Lily guided Max through his afternoon garden exploration. "But I can't help worrying about what would happen to her if we lost him." "Perhaps it's time to address that possibility directly," Dr. Sanders suggested. "Not because it's likely, but because fear of the unknown is often worse than confronting difficult truths." That evening, using simple language and social stories, illustrated sequences that helped Lily process complex situations, Rachel explained that Max was very old and wouldn't be with them forever. She emphasized that loving someone meant cherishing the time you had together, not fearing its end. To her surprise, Lily seemed to grasp the concept with remarkable clarity. "Max is teaching," she said simply, placing her hand on the German shepherd's gray muzzle. "For when he's gone." The insight was profound. Max wasn't just a companion. He was teaching Lily skills that would outlast him. Communication, empathy, adaptation to challenges. The realization brought Rachel both comfort and a deeper appreciation for the complex bond between her daughter and the aging dog. As Christmas approached, the Matthews home became a hub of activity. Michael visited regularly, often bringing updates about his father's progress. Robert Callahan had been cleared for a weekend visit to Oakville in January, a prospect that both excited and concerned Rachel. How would Max, with his limited senses, react to the presence of his former handler? How would Lily handle sharing Max's attention? The visit was postponed when Robert developed a respiratory infection, a setback that frustrated both Callahans, but secretly relieved Rachel, giving her more time to prepare Lily for the eventual meeting. Michael, acknowledging Rachel's concerns, brought a recording of his father's voice to familiarize Max with the sound he hadn't heard in years. "He won't be able to hear it," Rachel pointed out as Michael set up the small speaker. "No, but he might feel the vibrations," Michael explained. "And more importantly, it will help Lily understand who Dad is before she meets him." The recording was both practical and poignant. Robert Callahan's slightly slurred speech detailing the commands and routines he had once used with Max. Lily listened with unusual attention, repeating some of the words and mimicking the hand signals Robert described. "She's integrating his techniques with her own system," Dr. Sanders noted during her next visit, watching Lily guide Max with a combination of touch cues and the hand signals she had learned from the recording. "It's a remarkable example of scaffolded learning." The holiday season brought an unexpected gift in the form of local recognition. The mayor of Oakville, touched by the newspaper feature, declared December 15th Max Day, encouraging citizens to support the animal sanctuary and awareness for both disability services and autism programs. The proclamation was accompanied by a donation that allowed Barbie to create a dedicated fund for senior and special needs animals. The community response was heartwarming. The pet store organized a donation drive for the sanctuary. The hardware store contributed materials for ramps and adaptive equipment. The elementary school collected pet supplies as their holiday service project. Even the HOA board, which had been so opposed to Max's presence initially, voted unanimously to amend their pet restrictions to include exceptions for service and therapy animals. The most meaningful support came from Thomas Jenkins, the Vietnam veteran who had helped identify Max's FEMA connection. He organized a small group of local veterans to build an adaptive playground at the sanctuary specifically designed for interactions between children with sensory differences and animals with special needs. "We look after our own," he told Rachel at the groundbreaking ceremony. "Max served his country. Now we're serving his legacy." The ceremony, covered by local media, featured Lily cutting the ribbon with oversized scissors, her serious face focused intently on the task, as Max sat regally beside her. Though it was clear the elderly German shepherd had no understanding of the proceedings, his dignified presence lent weight to the occasion. The increased public attention brought both benefits and challenges. While donations flowed in to support Max's medical care and the sanctuary programs, the constant stream of well-wishers disrupted the careful routines Rachel had established. Lily, overwhelmed by the attention, began showing signs of regression, avoiding eye contact, increasing her repetitive behaviors, and clinging to Max as her primary source of security. Dr. Sanders suggested temporarily scaling back public appearances. "Lily's making wonderful progress, but she still has limits to what she can process. Too much sensory input becomes overwhelming." Rachel agreed, declining several interview requests and limiting visitors to their home. She explained the situation to Michael, who immediately offered his support. "Dad always says, public attention is hardest on the ones least equipped to understand it," he said. That's why he valued Max so much. No matter how many people wanted to shake his hand or take his picture after a rescue, Max only cared about doing his job and going home. This insight into Max's working life gave Rachel a new appreciation for the German Shepherd's calm acceptance of Lily's needs. Perhaps his years of focusing on a specific mission, finding people in disaster zones, had prepared him perfectly for his current role of supporting one small girl navigating her own complex landscape. As January arrived, bringing bitterly cold weather to Oakville, Rachel noticed subtle changes in Max. His morning stiffness lasted longer. His appetite became inconsistent. Twice he seemed momentarily disoriented in the house, standing uncertainly in the center of the living room as if he had forgotten his mental map. Dr. Adams, during a routine checkup, confirmed her observations. His arthritis is progressing despite the medications, the veterinarian explained gently, and his kidney values are continuing to decline. These aren't unexpected developments given his age and history, but we should be prepared, Rachel finished, her throat tight. The vet nodded sympathetically. He's not in crisis, but his systems are showing their age. Quality of life should be our primary consideration moving forward. Rachel shared the update with Michael, who received the news with quiet resignation. "We always knew this was coming," he said, watching Max doze peacefully beside Lily as she arranged her toys in precise patterns around him. "I just hoped Dad would get to see him first." "Maybe we shouldn't wait for your father to be well enough to travel," Rachel suggested. "Maybe we should bring Max to him." The logistics of such a trip were daunting. Max would need to travel nearly 3 hours to the rehabilitation facility. Lily would need extensive preparation for both the journey and the emotional complexity of the visit. Rachel would need to request time off work during her busiest season. Yet, as she considered the alternative, Mac's condition deteriorating before Robert Callahan could say a proper goodbye to his longtime partner, the challenges seemed surmountable. Michael embraced the idea with characteristic determination. "I'll handle the arrangements at the facility. They have a garden courtyard that would be perfect. Quiet, controlled environment. No overwhelming sensory input for either Max or Lily." Dr. Sanders helped develop a social story to prepare Lily for the visit, complete with photographs of the facility, Robert Callahan, and the journey they would take. Dr. Adams provided recommendations for making Max as comfortable as possible during the trip, including medication to ease his arthritis pain. The visit was scheduled for the third Saturday in January, chosen for optimal timing between Robert's therapy sessions and when the facility would be quietest. Rachel took Friday off work to allow for a relaxed departure, planning to stay overnight in a pet-friendly hotel near the rehabilitation center. As the day approached, Rachel found herself increasingly anxious, not just about the practicalities, but about what the meeting might mean emotionally. Would Robert's connection with Max overshadow Lily's? Would seeing his former handler trigger something in Max that might confuse or distress him? Would Lily, who struggled with changes to routine, be able to handle the complex emotions of the situation? Max himself seemed oblivious to the impending reunion, continuing his daily routines with the same measured dignity that had characterized his time with the Matthews. Only his increasing physical limitations, the slight wobble when he first stood in the mornings, the longer recovery time after walks, the occasional confusion in familiar spaces, hinted at the gradual decline Rachel had been warned to expect. The night before their departure, as Rachel packed the final items for their journey, Michael arrived with unexpected news. "There's been a change of plans," he said, his expression unreadable as he stood in the doorway. "Dad's doctor called an hour ago." Rachel's heart sank, assuming another setback had forced them to postpone again. "Is he worse?" "No," Michael replied, a smile breaking across his face. "He's been cleared for discharge. He's coming home. To my place. Tomorrow. We don't need to make the trip after all." The news should have been purely joyful, but Rachel immediately recognized the complications it created. They had prepared Lily for a specific scenario, a controlled visit in a neutral setting. Now everything would change. Robert would be in Oakville indefinitely. The interaction wouldn't be a single event, but potentially an ongoing relationship. "This is wonderful for your father," she said carefully, "but what does it mean for our visit, for Lily's preparation. Michael's smile faded slightly as he recognized her concerns. I hadn't thought about how this changes things for Lily. I was just so focused on Dad finally coming home. They sat at the kitchen table, recalibrating their plans. The hotel reservation would be canceled. Instead of a single, carefully managed encounter, they would need to develop a more flexible approach to introducing Robert into their lives. Maybe it's better this way, Michael suggested. Less pressure on everyone. We can start with a short visit, see how it goes, adjust as needed. Rachel wasn't convinced, but she recognized the importance of this moment for both Callahans. We'll need to prepare Lily differently, and we should still choose a neutral location for the first meeting. As they discussed options, neither noticed Lily standing in the hallway, listening intently, her small hand resting on Max's head as the German shepherd leaned against her leg in his characteristic supportive posture. The two watched the adults with parallel expressions of solemn observation, one pair of eyes cloudy with age, the other clear and absorbing every detail of the changing plans that would affect them both. The October sky hung heavy with rain as Rachel guided the car into the emergency veterinary clinic's parking lot. Lily sat in the back seat, unnaturally quiet, her small hands resting on Max's head. The German shepherd lay across the seat, his breathing labored, his once powerful body now terrifyingly still, except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. It had happened during their evening walk, a simple, slow circuit of the backyard that had become part of their nightly ritual. One moment Max had been moving steadily beside Lily, guided by her gentle touch on his shoulder. The next he had stumbled, then collapsed onto his side, his legs splaying awkwardly beneath him. "Something's wrong with Max," Lily had said, her voice rising with panic. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact that sent Rachel running from the porch where she'd been watching them. Now, as a veterinary technician helped them transfer Max onto a gurney, Rachel struggled to keep her own fear from showing. For Lily's sake, she maintained a calm exterior, but inside, dread coiled tight around her heart. The unspoken truth hung in the air between them. Max was old, his body worn by years of service and the ravages of neglect before he'd found his way to them. "We'll need to run some tests," Dr. Patterson, the emergency veterinarian, explained after a preliminary examination. "His heart rhythm is concerning, and given his age and medical history, there could be several underlying causes." Rachel nodded, automatically reaching for her credit card before remembering the precarious state of her finances. The previous week's car repair had depleted what little savings she had, and her next paycheck was still days away. "I understand if cost is a concern," Dr. Patterson said gently, reading her hesitation. "We can discuss options." The options were presented with compassionate professionalism, basic supportive care to keep Max comfortable versus extensive diagnostics and potential treatments, quality of life considerations versus aggressive intervention, and the unspoken option that hovered beneath the conversation, euthanasia as a merciful release from suffering. "I need to talk to my daughter," Rachel finally said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "and make some calls." In the waiting room, Lily sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the double doors through which they had wheeled Max away. When Rachel settled beside her, the little girl didn't look up. "The doctors are helping Max," Rachel began carefully. "Is he going to die?" The directness of the question, spoken in Lily's small voice, struck Rachel like a physical blow. She had never believed in lying to her daughter, even when the truth was difficult. "I don't know, sweetie. He's very sick, and he's also very old." Lily processed this information with the same intensity she brought to all new data. "Max was a hero," she finally said. "Michael showed us the pictures. Yes, he was, a very brave hero who saved people. Heroes die sometime." The simple statement, delivered without emotion, revealed a depth of understanding that Rachel hadn't realized her daughter possessed. Tears burned behind her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, they do." Sometimes even heroes can't keep fighting forever." While Lily remained in the waiting room under the watchful eye of a sympathetic receptionist, Rachel stepped outside to make calls. The first was to Michael Callahan, who had become a regular visitor over the past months, bringing stories and mementos of Max's working days that had helped fill in the blanks of the dog's remarkable life. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said immediately, his voice tight with concern. "And don't worry about the bills. Dad's insurance policy for Max is still active. He never canceled it after everything happened." The second call, harder to make, was to Dr. Sanders. "Lily might need extra support," Rachel explained, fighting to keep her voice steady, "if Max doesn't make it." "I'll clear my morning schedule," the therapist promised. "And Rachel, however this turns out, remember that Lily has grown stronger through her relationship with Max. That strength won't disappear, even if he does." As she ended the call, memories washed over Rachel. Max's first day in their home, bumping uncertainly into furniture, the first time Lily had guided him successfully through the living room, Max pressing against Lily during a thunderstorm, offering comfort despite his own discomfort. Each memory felt like a stitch being pulled from a wound that hadn't yet fully formed. When Michael arrived, his face grim with worry, he embraced both Rachel and, more surprisingly, Lily, who accepted the contact without her usual stiffening. "Max found my dad," he told Lily as they settled into the waiting room chairs. "Did I ever tell you that story?" Lily shook her head, her eyes fixed on his face with unusual directness. "It was after an earthquake in Turkey. A building collapsed, and my dad was inside helping evacuate people. When the aftershock hit, he got trapped under a concrete beam. The rescue teams couldn't hear him calling for help, but Max could smell him. He refused to leave the spot, kept digging and barking until they brought equipment to lift the beam." Michael's voice grew husky with emotion. "Dad always said Max saved his life twice. Once in Turkey and once when he came home with PTSD and couldn't see a reason to keep going. Max gave him purpose." As midnight approached, Dr. Patterson emerged with updated information. Max had suffered heart failure, complicated by his advanced kidney disease. They had stabilized him temporarily, but his prognosis was poor. "He's conscious now," the vet said gently, "if you'd like to see him." The treatment room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Max lay on a padded table, an IV line delivering fluids to his front leg, an oxygen mask covering his muzzle. Despite his weakened state, his tail thumped softly against the table when he caught their scents. Lily approached slowly, her small hand reaching out to touch Max's graying muzzle. "Brave Max," she whispered. For one heartbreaking moment, Rachel saw the full tableau, her autistic daughter connecting deeply with a blind deaf dog who had once pulled survivors from earthquake rubble, Michael Callahan, son of the handler who had trained Max for his life's work, and herself a single mother who had only wanted to give an unwanted animal a peaceful place to die. They had become an unlikely family, brought together by an aging German shepherd who had taught them all something about resilience. Patterson cleared her throat softly. "We need to discuss next steps," she said. "His organs are shutting down. We can continue supportive care, but it will only delay the inevitable and potentially prolong his suffering." The unspoken question hung in the air. Was it time to let Max go? Michael spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "In rescue work, there's a saying, 'Everyone comes home.' It means we don't leave anyone behind, even if they're coming home for the last time." He looked at Rachel, then at Lily. "But this isn't my decision to make." Rachel knelt beside Lily, bringing herself to eye level with her daughter. "Sweetie, the doctors have done everything they can, but Max is very, very sick. His body is worn out from being so brave for so many years." Lily stroked Max's ear with methodical gentleness. "He hurts?" "Yes, I think he does." "Can they make the hurt stop?" Rachel swallowed hard. "They can help him go to sleep and not wake up. He wouldn't hurt any more." Lily considered this with her characteristic intensity. "Like Grandpa did." The reference to Rachel's father, who had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier, caught her by surprise. They had explained his death to Lily in similar terms, that the doctors had helped him sleep so he wouldn't hurt anymore. "Yes, like that." Lily was quiet for a long moment, her hand never leaving Mac's fur. "He was brave," she finally said. "He can rest now." The simple clarity of her decision, free from the emotional turmoil that clouded the adult's thinking, broke something open inside Rachel. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks as she nodded to Dr. Patterson, who quietly began preparing the necessary medication. "Would you like some time alone with him first?" the vet asked gently. In the quiet of the treatment room, with Michael standing respectfully by the door, Rachel and Lily sat beside Max. Rachel told him he was loved, that he had been the best dog, that he had changed their lives forever. Lily, in her own way, communicated her goodbye by methodically touching each of the spots on his body that she had used to guide him: his left shoulder, his right shoulder, the top of his head, as if giving him directions for his final journey. When Dr. Patterson returned, Mac's breathing had become more labored, his body tense with pain despite the medications. The time had come. "Brave Max," Lily whispered one last time as the sedative took effect, easing the German Shepherd into a peaceful sleep before the final injection would stop his heart. Mission complete. The small leather case Michael had brought contained more than just photographs and Max's old FEMA collar. It held an entire history that had been missing from their understanding of the German Shepherd who had transformed their lives. As he carefully arranged the contents on the Matthews coffee table, Michael's hands moved with reverence, each item a piece of the puzzle that was Max's remarkable life. "This is Mac's official FEMA certification," he explained, showing Rachel and Lily a framed document with governmental seals and signatures. He completed over 2,000 hours of specialized training before his first deployment. Dad says he was a natural from the beginning, focused, determined, unshakable. Lily leaned forward, studying the photograph attached to the certificate. A younger, robust Max standing at attention, his dark eyes alert and intelligent, no hint of the cloudiness that now obscured his vision. "Say, Max?" she asked with characteristic directness, glancing from the photograph to the elderly German Shepherd resting beside her. "The very same," Michael confirmed, smiling at her perceptiveness, "but a long time ago, before he lost his sight and hearing." The next item was a logbook, its pages dog-eared and stained from field conditions. Inside, Robert Callahan had meticulously documented every mission: dates, locations, conditions, outcomes. Michael turned to a page marked with a Turkish flag. "This was their most famous rescue," he said quietly. "An apartment building collapsed during an earthquake in Istanbul. Dad and Max were part of the American response team. They'd been searching for survivors for nearly 20 hours when an aftershock hit. Dad was inside a partially cleared section when it further collapsed." Rachel listened intently, one arm around Lily, who was showing unusual patience with the extended narrative. "The rubble shift cut off Dad's exit and trapped him under a concrete support beam. It didn't crush him, but he couldn't move or call for help effectively. The rescue team couldn't hear him over the generators and equipment, but Max could smell him." Michael's voice grew husky with emotion. "Max refused to leave the spot. He kept digging and barking, directing the other handlers to the exact location. It took them 4 hours to safely extract Dad. The doctor said another hour and he might have lost his leg from compartment syndrome." He handed Rachel a newspaper clipping with a photograph of Robert and Max receiving commendations from the Turkish government. They became minor celebrities in the search and rescue community after that. Dad said it was their sixth sense. They could communicate without words or signals, just pure understanding. As Michael continued sharing stories and memorabilia, Rachel noticed Lily's unusual engagement. Typically, her daughter struggled to maintain attention during lengthy verbal exchanges, but today she examined each photograph and artifact with careful concentration, occasionally asking simple but perceptive questions. "Was Max scared?" she asked when Michael described a helicopter evacuation from a wildfire zone. "Dad said he was never scared during missions," Michael answered. "He was too focused on the job, but he didn't like the helicopter noise. Dad would put his hands over Max's ears during takeoff and landing." Lily nodded solemnly, processing this information before reaching over to gently touch Max's ear, as if offering belated comfort for those long-ago moments of distress. The most poignant item came last. A simple snapshot of Robert and Max relaxing beside a lake, the handler's arm draped casually around his dog's shoulders, both looking peaceful away from the high-stakes environment of disaster response. "This was their last vacation before the accident," Michael explained, his voice dropping. "They went to Dad's cabin in Michigan for a fishing weekend. 2 weeks later, they were deployed to Mexico City after the earthquake." He fell silent, his expression darkening at the memory. Rachel waited, sensing there was more to the story than what had been shared in their previous conversations. "What really happened in Mexico City?" she asked gently. "You mentioned Max was injured, but not how." Michael took a deep breath. "They were searching a collapsed school. Max had indicated a potential survivor in a narrow void space. The only way to reach them was through a tight passage that was too small for a human rescuer. They sent Max in with a camera and GPS tracker on his harness." He paused, collecting himself. "While Max was inside, another aftershock hit. Dad refused to leave without Max and went in after him. That's when the secondary collapse occurred. Dad suffered a traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures. Max was pinned for hours before they could extract him. By the time they got him out, he'd sustained damage to his optic nerve from debris and severe inner ear trauma from the concussive force." "But they found the survivor," Lily interjected unexpectedly. Michael looked up in surprise. "Yes, they did. A 7-year-old girl. She'd been trapped for over 60 hours. "How did you know that?" Lily pointed to a small medal half hidden among the papers, a colorful ribbon with Spanish text, and a date that corresponded to the Mexico City earthquake. "That's remarkable," Michael said, genuinely impressed. "You're right. This is the Civilian Medal of Valor they awarded to both Dad and Max. The girl survived because of them." As the full picture of Max's past emerged, Rachel felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in the noble service animal who now shared their home, sadness for the trauma he had endured, and a deeper understanding of the bond between handler and dog that had somehow been severed by circumstances beyond their control. "But I don't understand," she said finally. "If both your father and Max survived, how did they get separated? Why did Max end up abandoned at a sanctuary in Michigan?" Michael's expression grew troubled. "That's the part that still doesn't make complete sense. Dad was airlifted to a trauma center in Texas. He was in a coma for weeks. I was deployed overseas and couldn't get emergency leave immediately. By the time I reached him, Max was already gone." "Gone where?" Rachel pressed. "According to what I could piece together, FEMA's veterinary team initially treated Max's injuries, but his working career was obviously over. The standard protocol would have been to release him to Dad's care as his handler, but with Dad incapacitated and no family immediately available, they gave him to someone else," Rachel concluded. Michael nodded. "A temporary foster situation that was supposed to last until Dad recovered or I returned. But something went wrong. The paperwork got lost in bureaucracy. Dad couldn't advocate for himself. I was dealing with his medical decisions and didn't even know Max was missing for months." He ran a hand through his hair in lingering frustration. "By the time I started searching, the foster family had moved from Texas. The contact information was outdated. FEMA had classified Max as retired and rehomed, and closed the file. "So how did you find him?" Rachel asked, glancing at Max, who had fallen asleep during their conversation, his breathing deep and even. "Pure luck," Michael admitted. "I'd been searching for almost 3 years, checking shelters, veterinary records, rescue organizations. I'd almost given up when a buddy from my unit sent me that newspaper article about the blind and deaf hero dog helping an autistic child. He remembered Dad talking about Max constantly during joint training exercises and thought it might be the same dog." He smiled faintly. "I couldn't be sure from just the photo. German Shepherds can look similar, especially to someone who didn't know Max personally. But the age was right, the disabilities matched his injuries, and the location wasn't impossible. Michigan is where Dad's cabin is. Maybe whoever had him brought him here and then couldn't or wouldn't care for him anymore." "So you came to see for yourself," Rachel said, understanding now his cautious observation of their home before introducing himself. "I had to be certain before I got Dad's hopes up. He's had enough disappointments during his recovery." Michael's expression softened as he watched Max sleeping peacefully beside Lily. "But I knew the moment he reacted to my scent. Dogs never forget their people's family members." The revelation of Max's full history answered many questions, but raised an uncomfortable new one that Rachel had been avoiding since Michael's appearance. Now that Max had been found, would the Callahans want him back? As if reading her thoughts, Michael reached across the coffee table and gently touched her hand. "Dad doesn't expect to take Max back," he said quietly. "He understands that Max has a new home, a new purpose. He just wants to see him, to know he's being loved." Relief washed over Rachel, followed immediately by compassion for Robert Callahan, who had lost not only his health and career, but also his beloved partner. "Of course your father should see Max," she said. "We'll figure out how to make it work." "Dad's not well enough to travel yet," Michael explained. "But his doctors say having a goal," seeing Max again, "has accelerated his recovery. He's working harder in physical therapy, pushing himself to regain speech and mobility." This revelation added another layer to Max's remarkable impact. Even separated from his handler, he was still somehow helping Robert heal. The thought solidified an idea that had been forming in Rachel's mind since their first conversation with Michael. "What if Max's story could help others?" she suggested. "Not just Lily, not just your father, but other disabled animals and special needs children. What if there's a way to honor Max's service by creating something lasting?" Michael's eyes lit up with interest. "What are you thinking?" Before Rachel could elaborate, Lily, who had been quietly examining the photograph spread across the table, spoke with unexpected clarity. "Max School," she stated firmly, "for dogs like Max and kids like me." Rachel and Michael exchanged surprised glances at the simple but profound suggestion. In those 3 words, Lily had captured exactly what Rachel had been trying to articulate. A program that would pair special needs children with disabled shelter animals, creating mutual benefit and honoring Max's legacy. "Max School," Rachel repeated thoughtfully. "I think that's the perfect name for it." As they began discussing possibilities, partnering with Barbie's Sanctuary, seeking guidance from service animal trainers, consulting with special education professionals, Max stirred from his nap, his cloudy eyes opening as if sensing the energy in the room. Though he couldn't see their excited faces or hear their animated conversation, he seemed to understand something important was happening. He rose stiffly and moved to position himself between Lily and the adults, his traditional place when important matters were being discussed. "He still wants to help," Michael observed softly. "Even now, he's trying to do his job." "He's helping," Rachel replied, watching as Lily automatically placed her hand on Max's shoulder, using their special communication system to guide him closer. "More than we ever imagined possible." Spring came to Oakville with an explosion of dogwood blossoms and daffodils. 6 months had passed since Mac's peaceful passing in the veterinary clinic where he had drifted away, surrounded by the unlikely family that had formed around him in his final chapter. For Rachel, those months had brought both grief and unexpected growth as she and Lily navigated life without the German shepherd who had transformed their world. The memorial service had been Michael's idea, a small gathering in their backyard where Max had spent his final happy months. Robert Callahan had attended, arriving in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse, his body still bearing the marks of the accident that had separated him from his beloved service dog. Though his speech was slurred from the traumatic brain injury he'd suffered, his eyes had been clear and grateful as he clasped Rachel's hands in his. "You gave him purpose," he'd said simply. "That's all any of us want in the end." On this bright April morning, Rachel stood on the porch watching Lily in the backyard. Her daughter knelt beside a newly installed stone bench that bore a simple inscription, "Max, hero, teacher, friend." Beside the bench stood a young dogwood tree, its white blossoms catching the morning light. The tree had been a gift from the neighborhood, the same neighbors who had once petitioned for Max's removal. "Ready for your big day?" Rachel asked, stepping into the yard. Lily nodded without looking up, her fingers tracing the engraved letters of Max's name. In the aftermath of Mac's death, Rachel had worried that Lily might retreat back into her shell, losing the fragile progress she had made. Dr. Sanders had prepared them as best she could, creating social stories about death and grief appropriate for Lily's understanding. But as with everything related to Max, Lily had surprised them all. The painful experience had certainly affected her. For weeks she had carried Max's old collar everywhere, sleeping with it beside her pillow. But rather than withdrawing, she had channeled her grief in unexpected directions. "I want to help dogs like Max," she had announced one evening in January, her most complete sentence in months. "Dogs with no people." That simple declaration had evolved, with guidance from Rachel and Dr. Sanders, into Lily's Heroes, a program that paired children on the autism spectrum with senior and special needs shelter dogs. Today marked the official launch at the Barbie Keel Animal Sanctuary, where Max's journey with them had begun. "Lily, Rachel," Barbie's voice carried across the yard as the elderly woman made her way along the stone path. At 78, she moved more slowly these days, but refused to use the cane her doctor had prescribed. "The camera crew is setting up. Are you two ready to be famous?" The local news station had arranged to cover the opening ceremony, intrigued by the story of how one abandoned dog had inspired a program that now had a waiting list of participants. The publicity had brought unexpected financial support, a grant from a national animal welfare organization, donations from the community, and, most significantly, a substantial contribution from the Callahan Foundation, which Michael had established in his father's name. Robert Callahan himself had become Lily's most enthusiastic advocate. Though still recovering from his injuries, he had insisted on serving as an advisor to the program, sharing his expertise in animal training and bringing valuable credibility with his FEMA connections. "Not famous," Lily corrected Barbie seriously, rising to her feet. "Just helping." Rachel smiled at her daughter's simple clarity. In the 6 months since Max's death, Lily's communication had improved dramatically. Her sentences remained concise, her affect still somewhat flat by typical standards, but her engagement with the world had expanded in ways Rachel had once barely dared to hope for. Dr. Sanders attributed much of this progress to the sense of purpose Max had given her. "Some children on the spectrum flourish when they feel needed," she had explained. "Max needed Lily's guidance system to navigate his world. Now other dogs need her expertise. It's powerful motivation to connect." As they walked toward the sanctuary's main building, now adorned with a new sign announcing Lily's Heroes, where special needs meet special hearts, Rachel reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them here. A forgotten dog, a struggling child, a community that had learned to see beyond limitations to possibility. The ceremony itself was brief, designed with Lily's tolerance for social situations in mind. Barbie welcomed the small crowd, explaining the program's mission. Michael unveiled a commemorative plaque featuring Max's photograph in his working days, standing proudly in his FEMA harness. Rachel thanked the community and donors whose support had made everything possible. Then it was Lily's turn. They had practiced for weeks, keeping her parts simple. She needed only to cut the ribbon stretched across the doorway of the newly renovated quiet room where children would first meet their canine partners. But Lily surprised everyone, including Rachel. Stepping to the microphone, she spoke clearly, her eyes fixed on a point just above the audience's heads in her characteristic way of managing social pressure. Max couldn't see or hear, she said. People thought he couldn't do things. I showed him how. These dogs need people to show them how, too. She paused, then added with simple conviction, everyone can help someone. With those words, she cut the ribbon, and the small crowd erupted in applause. Rachel blinked back tears as she watched her daughter. Still socially awkward, still autistic, but standing with quiet confidence before a group of strangers, advocating for something she believed in. The first participants were already waiting to be introduced to their potential canine partners. 5 children with varying degrees of autism, each accompanied by parents who looked equal parts hopeful and apprehensive. Rachel recognized that look all too well. It was the same one she had worn for years. The careful balance between protecting a vulnerable child and allowing them room to grow. Inside the quiet room, a veteran trainer from Robert's FEMA team now guided the interactions, showing each child how to approach the dogs. A 1-9 Beagle, a 3-legged Labrador mix, an elderly dachshund with a spinal condition, a partially paralyzed border collie, and a deaf Dalmatian. Each animal had been carefully assessed for temperament and needs compatible with their potential child partners. Lily moved among them with the authority of experience, occasionally offering simple guidance. "Slower hands," she told a boy who reached too quickly for the Beagle. He's scared still. By day's end, 3 successful matches had been made, with the children and dogs scheduled to begin their twice-weekly sessions the following week. The remaining children would return to meet other potential partners as they became available. As the last family departed, Rachel found herself standing beside Robert Callahan's wheelchair near the memorial plaque for Max. "Your daughter is extraordinary," he said, his speech deliberate but clearer than it had been months ago, a testament to his ongoing recovery. "She reminds me of Max, actually." "How so?" Rachel asked. "She doesn't see limitations, just different ways of navigating the world," he smiled, touching the image of his former partner. "Max never knew he was disabled. He'd just adapted and kept going. That's what Lily does." Later that evening, as Rachel tucked Lily into bed, her daughter held out a small object, Max's identification tag, which she had carried in her pocket throughout the day. "He helped us today," Lily said simply. "He's still helping." Rachel nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Yes, he is." "Can I tell you a secret?" Lily whispered, an unusual initiation of intimate conversation that caught Rachel by surprise. "Of course, Swede. Sometimes I still feel Max, not for real," she clarified with her characteristic precision, "but like, remember." Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, considering her response carefully. "I think that's how love works. The people and animals we love leave pieces of themselves inside us. Those pieces help us be braver, or kinder, or stronger." Lily nodded seriously. "Mac's pieces helped today." "They sure did." As she turned out the light, Rachel paused in the doorway, watching her daughter's silhouette in the dim glow of the nightlight. The past year had been a journey neither of them could have anticipated when they first met a blind, deaf German shepherd at the sanctuary gates. The nursery rhyme her mother used to recite came suddenly to mind. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. One small change, the impulsive decision to adopt a dog no one else wanted, had altered the entire trajectory of their lives. The following morning brought news from Michael. The FEMA regional office had approved their proposal to include a junior training program as part of Lily's Heroes. Children who completed the basic partnership program could advance to learning simplified search and rescue techniques using scent identification, skills that honored Max's legacy, while building confidence and purpose. "Dad's over the moon about it," Michael told her over coffee at the small cafe that had become their regular meeting place. "The doctors say his involvement with the program is accelerating his recovery, gives him something to work toward." The friendship that had developed between Rachel and Michael remained uncomplicated, supportive, without pressure. Both recognized that their connection had formed through extraordinary circumstances, and neither rushed to define it as anything more than what it naturally was. Two people bound by shared respect for a remarkable dog and concern for those he had left in their care. Still, as spring progressed into summer, their coffee meetings grew longer, their text exchanges more frequent. Michael began joining Rachel and Lily for Sunday dinners, bringing stories of his father's progress and updates on the Foundation's work. By July, Lily's Heroes had expanded to 3 additional shelters in neighboring counties. A documentary filmmaker had approached them about featuring the program in a series about innovative approaches to both animal welfare and special needs education. The Callahan Foundation had secured funding for a dedicated facility that would include adaptive training equipment and sensory-friendly spaces. Most importantly to Rachel, Lily continued to thrive. Though still requiring substantial support in many areas, her daughter moved through the world with new confidence. Her special interest in dog behavior had given her a socially valued expertise, creating natural bridges to meaningful interaction with others. On the anniversary of the day they had brought Max home, Rachel, Lily, Michael, and Robert gathered in the Matthews backyard for a quiet celebration. Robert, now using a walker rather than a wheelchair, carefully made his way to the memorial bench, placing a weathered FEMA patch beside the fresh flowers Lily had arranged. "To Max," he said, raising a glass of lemonade, "who taught us all how to see in the dark." "To Max," the others echoed. As twilight softened the edges of the yard, Lily led them through a tour of her latest project, a sensory garden designed with both human and canine visitors in mind. Textured pathways, aromatic herbs, and sound elements like wind chimes and a small fountain created an environment that engaged all the senses. "It's for dogs like Max," she explained with characteristic directness, "so they can find their way." Rachel watched her daughter moving confidently through the garden she had designed, pointing out features to Robert, who nodded with genuine interest. Michael stood beside Rachel, his hand lightly touching hers. "You know what amazes me most?" he said quietly. "A year ago, we all thought we were rescuing Max. Turns out he was rescuing us." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Rachel reflected on the truth of those words. An abandoned, disabled dog had created connections that none of them could have foreseen. Between a mother and daughter, between strangers who became family, between children and animals that the world had overlooked. Max had indeed shown them all how to find their way, even in darkness. On the porch steps, Lily sat beside Robert, carefully helping him identify the herbs in her garden by scent, since the gathering darkness made visual identification difficult. The tenderness in her movements, the patience in her explanations, spoke volumes about what Max had taught her. That limitations were simply invitations to find new paths forward. "He'd be proud of her," Michael said, following Rachel's gaze. "Of all of us, really." Rachel nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace settle around them like the evening air. "He would. And somewhere I think he knows. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.